Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Anne and I'm the consultant at the Digital Transformation Hub, a part of the Info Exchange group with Connecting Up. The Hub focuses on digital technology as an enabler to support service transformation and new ways of working, assisting nonprofits on a broader digital transformation journey. Before we begin, we'll start with a bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issue, please type it into the chat box on your webinar panel and I can assist you. If you have any question during the sessions, please also type into the chat box and Sophie and I will answer them by the end of the webinar. We really encourage you to ask as many questions as you think of throughout the session to make this as interactive a session as possible. No question is too silly. If you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video in the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and the link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you as soon as we can after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. Today, I'm excited to welcome you to NFP Employees Mastering 365, working with cloud files with Sophie. Hi, Sophie.
Thanks, Anne, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'd first like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here on the call today. Firstly, a little bit about myself. I'm one of the Digital Transformation Hub consultants here at Info Exchange, and alongside Anne and the rest of my team, we work daily talking with non-for-profits about their technology and helping them take the next step on their digital transformation. Ultimately, I really enjoy talking about technology, utilizing the Microsoft 365 package, talking about all different client case management, CRM systems, cybersecurity, so that you can ultimately focus on your service delivery as opposed to your technology, and your technology is just an enabler so that your staff can be out in the community rather than doing administration. So as Anne mentioned, today is our third Microsoft session this month, where today we're hoping to spend the next 20 minutes building your confidence and understanding in your files, how they're saved, and so that you feel confident collaborating with your colleagues and improving your remote working experience. So by the end of the session, we aim to evaluate the best option to suit your needs when file sharing, discuss our recommended option when file sharing, weigh up different considerations when sharing internally or externally to make sure that you're using the best solution that meets your needs. And then we're going to try and put that all together with a relatable example and make sense to all this Microsoft lingo. Great. So to understand this webinar further, let's go back to basics in it and take a step and look at the different cloud technologies. Microsoft at its beginning was the Microsoft Office package. So you had your Word, you had your PowerPoint, you had the Office pack. Microsoft shifted their model, and so what shifted towards what we call software as a service, so SaaS. Changed their pricing structure, not that important, but more importantly, it allowed Microsoft to be able to offer so much more, including productivity services, etc., and most importantly, cloud-based file storage and collaboration, so that you no longer need that daunting file server or server room at the back of your office that no one really knows what's going on there. There's just a lot of noises. So there are three styles of technology that Microsoft has used that you can use as file storage. We'll explain them and then we'll discuss what's the best option for you. The first one is OneDrive. So in the blue bubble, the blue cloud just there, they let you store and protect your personal files. And you can share them with others by granting permissions and access from any location or drive or device. The second is Teams. So Teams is a collaboration app for your team. Whether working remotely or in the office together, you can develop, collaborate, and publish your work. It's your workplace hub. So you've got your centralized chat, you can connect with your team, you can enable that quick messaging, file sharing in a way that's far more efficient than email, and you can actually cope with the bigger files. Thirdly, we have SharePoint. So we often see SharePoint used by large non-for-profits and corporates. It should be used to store most of your organization files, and it's designed to enable collaboration and sharing across your organization or within a restricted group. You'll often find that large non-for-profits and corporates will use this for their intranets. Great. So why? Why has Microsoft moved to using this file and cloud storage solution? Though it's quite daunting, it provides great flexibility and opportunity to your team and to yourself, the way that you use your files. So it allows you to have version history and version control so that it automatically saves each time you save a document. So rather than having to have version 1, version 2, version 3, etc. And it also provides you a history so you can see who last edited the document and go back to that prior version if required. It allows you to collaborate at the same time. To me, this is the big win, and I use this every day in my work so that you can make changes at the fly as you're working together on that document, and rather than doing that markup commenting style that took a lot longer to get the same outcome. External sharing. So instead of sending a file like we used to and having the file size limitations on your emails, etc., you can send them a link and the recipient can access that at any time. Mobile access. So you can access the documents, files anywhere, anytime. It's a big pro, it's also a big con, depending on how you wish to access your organizations at what time. File level permissions. So you can access and set permissions at any file level and restrict or permit access. And the ability to create and store large files that weren't previously possible. You have so much more digital capacity. You aren't limited by your network drive. You've got so much more storage. So thinking about the benefits and the tools that Microsoft provide, what and how is suitable for you? What product out there, out of the three, would work to the way that you work on a daily basis? Let's start with OneDrive. OneDrive should be used to store documents and files that you wish to keep to yourself, or they're private. It's a lot like that old network drive that you used to see on your file explorer that was either called personal or your name. The difference with OneDrive is that it's far easier to use and it's stored in the cloud. So with OneDrive, you no longer need to store your files on your PC or your desktop because that risked being lost or accidentally deleted. When you save it in OneDrive, it's all backed up in the cloud. So you can sync your files from the cloud to the computer. So you can sync your desktop, etc. It can also be used when you're drafting a document and you aren't ready yet to share it with everyone. You can work in your OneDrive and then share it in Teams. Teams. Teams is the front interface of SharePoint and OneDrive. So it doesn't store the files, it is just showing us the files. So Teams directs you to SharePoint when you open a file in a channel, just like this screenshot, or OneDrive when you share files in a private chat. Do remember that if you share files in a private chat, it's only visible to the people in that chat. And if the file is shared in a private chat and then that person leaves the non-for-profit, that chat becomes inaccessible, that file becomes inaccessible. So try not to share files as much as you can in your chats. Share them in your files, in your channel files. So when once you've drafted that document, you're ready to collaborate with others, you're ready to share it, you save it in Teams. This is our recommended approach. SharePoint. SharePoint is used by several non-for-profits for that file storage and synchronization. For smaller non-for-profits, we recommend using Teams in preference to SharePoint because it's a simpler and easier way to access the information. SharePoint is great for those larger non-for-profits and organizations where they need an intranet. Now that we've explained a little bit of SharePoint, we're going to focus on the OneDrives and Teams component because that's our main target and our preference when setting this up. So we've had a quick overview on each of them. What's the difference? What's the similarities? Teams and OneDrive will both store your files for you. Teams will set access based on the permissions in that channel or in that folder. OneDrive, you have control of your permissions, you are in control of that file, and you share it to people that you wish to share it with. So then, thinking of that, OneDrive is best for when you're drafting or storing your private files. Teams is best when you're sharing and collaborating on team documents. Both Teams and OneDrive have that editing version history support. The security is set based on permissions in Teams versus permissions of your own. And this is really the big difference. Teams has all the additional tools to collaborate together. OneDrive only stores the file storage and sharing features. So that's why it works really well for your personal, but as soon as you start working with others, bring it into Teams because then it's all in the one space that everyone has the permissions set by the organization. Great. So then, how do you share? Sharing is really easy when it comes to cloud technology. Instead of sending a file like we did in the old days, we now can just send a link and the recipient will be able to access that file in that version. When sending a link to the file in Teams, you don't need to be concerned about file size or email limits because you're just sending them a link. For example, we used to have to think about my PowerPoint file is 14 megabytes, my email limit is 10 megabytes. In that scenario, you wouldn't have sent the file. Now, being able to share just by a link, you can share that PowerPoint easily, and then everyone has access to it. The thing I really like is that if I needed someone to look and review a document, I can send them that exact version. And then if I continued editing on it between the send and them looking at it, they still have the most up-to-date version. To me, that's really beneficial. So we've unpacked why we use technology, the cloud technology, the different products available, and when to use what. Let's try and apply that to a real life example, and I hope you're able to align with this example. So David here has just found a grant. He's found a CRM grant that's going to be able to fund their new upgrade. Fantastic. He needs to go draft this grant proposal, so he needs to start somewhere. He's not ready to share this yet. He shared that the grant's there, don't worry, everyone knows about it, but he's not ready to share his first draft of that grant proposal document. So he's going to work in OneDrive. Once David has finished the draft, he's proofed it, he's justified why he needs the new CRM, he's pretty happy with it. He's ready to share that with his colleagues for their input. The best way to facilitate this is he's going to move it into a grant proposal folder in Teams. And this will create a link and he will share that with his team, asking them for their review. His team gets access, they click on the link, they start adding comments and recommended changes. David can review them as they're working in it. They can even have a little commentary in the comments trying to figure out what's the best statement. Once David has resolved all the comments and pieces of feedback, he has his final grant proposal. He's now ready to send that to the board for approval or off to the grant funder for submission, and he can send that link on. So he's gone from OneDrive, where he stored his first draft. He's ready to collaborate. He's gone into Teams, moved the file there. The team were able to collaborate and share together. That's the ultimate aim of the different ways that you can move through the different systems and use them to your best advantage. Thinking about that, try and use that in your day-to-day. So try and start using the different files, storage and collaboration to excel in the way that you work. Great, now I'll pass it back to Anne for questions.
Thank you, Sophie. We have a first question here. And for others' question, please, everyone, please feel free to pop in question. The first question is from Ewan. How do I get OneDrive to show in my network folder?
Absolutely. So that's quite simple to do. It's syncing it down to your file explorer. What we can do is we can pop some instructions in the follow-up email that will show you how to do that. So it's really simple, and then you can access it quite easily.
Yes, thank you, Sophie. The second question is from Deborah. What is your definition of a large NFP?
That is a really grey area. So we generally consider it by the number of people accessing or number of users. And I say users because I don't want to say staff, because there are some organisations that have low staff, high volunteers. So we generally say a large organisation sits at about a minimum of 100 staff. Now, we've recommended that small to medium size use Teams as a preference. There are organisations that will that are quite tech advanced and will need that SharePoint site. The rationale we recommend Teams is that it's a simpler functionality to train and support staff with ongoing, and it's easier to set those permissions and collaborate at a faster way rather than SharePoint.
Thank you. The next question is from Graham. When you say move the file to Teams, how do you generally do it?
So I'm going to take that question as literally, is that you can take, if you're in your OneDrive, you can drag that file into your Teams files. So drop and drag, essentially. I hope that answers that question. Welcome to elaborate a little bit more and pop another question there.
Yeah. Feel free to pop in chat if you think you want to clarify or comment on that question. Other than that, we can move on to the next one. Can you share files and collaborate with people that don't have an organization email address?
So it does depend on your permissions that have been set by your organization, but in most instances, yes, you can. I'd recommend exploring what you're sharing and why you're sharing it externally, just so that there are restrictions around, not that they go share it to everyone. So always do be careful, putting on a cybersecurity hat, always be careful when sharing links and things like that, especially documents with high IP. But depending on your configuration, yes, you should be able to share externally.
A lot of questions today. Stephen asked, does the volunteer committee or board all need Office 365?
Do you want to jump in, Anne, on that one?
Yes. So it all depends with the organization I've worked with. They build a separate site, or you might call it portal, for board and volunteer, they do not need to have organizational email to use it. They just need to register for a Microsoft email with their current email now, like Gmail or their own organizational email, and then we invite them to that site or portal as at a separate as an external user. As an external user, they might have some limitation in functionality when they use Office 365, but generally, if it's just for editing and then reading files online, then it should be fine if with SharePoint or OneDrive. I hope that answers your question. I'll move on to the next question from Max. What backup solution do you recommend for SharePoint files? So would you mind if I take that one, Sophie?
Absolutely.
With SharePoint files, there are a lot of backup solutions. With itself, whenever you delete something, it stays in your recycle bin for 90 days, and then it go to admin recycle bins for another period, which, yeah, it's like a double protections from Microsoft already. If you want to apply a backup solution, either get you firstly and you should, if you have an IT provider or casual IT consultant, always consult them, because they are the one who set up your Office 365 or whoever set up your Office 365, because backup work closely with Office 365 configuration. There are some backup solutions that we might use, for example, like Spanning or heaps other products, but always whichever products you go with, always take into account of your current Office 365 configuration. If you are an SSCF organization, be in touch with our Digital Transformation Hub, and then we can work out with you which backup solution might suit your organization. I hope that helped, Max. I'll move to the next question. Where do you drag the OneDrive file? Do you have to open Teams and choose a team, or can this be done using File Explorer? I think this one is the next question of how to move a file from OneDrive to Teams.
Oh, okay. So if you wanted to, so if we take the example of David again, and you wanted to start that grant proposal, I would recommend opening either Word or however you're going to draft it, and then save as into your OneDrive, and then you can navigate it in your File Explorer or in OneDrive Online. Does that answer the question, Anne?
Yeah, I think that's
okay.
The question. Question from Deborah. We have files currently stored on a server. Where should we store them when we decommission the server?
So I'm hoping you're decommissioning the server because you're moving to Microsoft 365, and your IT provider would be able to provide the best recommendation on, firstly, why it's not moving into the cloud, where it should be stored as an alternative, and the consideration of when it needs to be deleted and things like that. So I'd recommend actually speaking with your IT provider, because they understand a little bit more about your environment than what we are able to answer in this call.
I hope that answers your question, Deborah. If you have any comments, please pop in. Next question from Ian. Can you use Team to create something similar to board portal, where board members can access all the finance or other report that are being presented at meetings, or even as a hub where policy and constitution documents can be stored? I will continue from my previous answer about volunteer and board portal. Yes, you can, Ian. And yeah, there are several ways to implement it, but yeah, we have done that with a few NFP. the board member do not need to have a Microsoft license to access it. They can be invited as external user depending on your Office 365 tenant configuration. So yeah, that's the answer about board portal. Next question from David. Assume we are a bigger NFP and need SharePoint. However, we also want to use Teams. I understand that Teams stores file in SharePoint. How do we reconcile the two? For example, assume all company documents are in SharePoint. Do we link Teams to this SharePoint site so that we don't end up with heaps of Teams SharePoint sites along with our other SharePoint sites containing all our data? Should I have a take on it, or Sophie, do you want to?
Most welcome to, Anne.
So we have had this before with our client, because there are organizations, they have already used SharePoint, but then they got a revamped project with Teams. Microsoft has invented a new things called Hub, which is used to merge those two in a way that you can link the sites to a hub. The hub is just a concept that you can link related sites together. Yeah, they're under the same umbrella. You can search files, all the files among sites in the same hub. So, and then you can present them on the front end, so user can easily find those sites as well. So that's a quick way to reconcile those from a SharePoint view. If it is a Teams view, you can add link to those SharePoint sites or SharePoint document libraries that are related to Teams. Just make sure that when you do that, whichever way, manage the permissions configurations adequately, so user do not have some hiccup with permissions, which might cause a lot of user experience when these two are mixed up together. I hope that answered your question, David. So Graham still asked about dragging to Teams. So when you open Teams, there is a Files tab in each channel. And then you open another File Explorer window as well. You drag the file, you click on the file in File Explorer window and you drag it to the Files tab in Teams. If you have any issue, or if you would like us to send more resources after this webinar, please feel free to pop in questions or in the feedback form at the end of the webinar. So we will send you those quick instructions about updating files or uploading files to Teams. Next question from Max. If you share a link to an Excel file in OneDrive or SharePoint with an external person, can they only open it in Excel online, or can they open and edit it in their desktop version of Excel? Sophie?
It will depend on what they have on their computer. So the standard open will open online. So for most cases where you're viewing and you're editing, like a high level review, that might be sufficient. But if they, for example, don't have a Microsoft license, it will open, they won't be able to open and collaborate in that single document. They will send you back a version. Is there anything that you would add to that, Anne?
No, I think, yeah, that's relevant. Yeah, I hope Graham, it's good that Graham can verify into Teams now. All good. Still a question from Deborah with the server question. They are a small organization, and then they are stored on OneDrive. I hope you can clarify what that means. Otherwise, I'll move on. Do you get that clearly, Sophie, or would you like that to be clarified?
Sorry, was that Deb's?
It's still the question about server from Deborah. She just want to say that they are a small org, and she said, whose OneDrive should we store our files in? So probably a question from moving files from server. And when she decommissioned the server, where should she store their file? Whose OneDrive should they store their file in?
What I think might be best, Deb, is I'd recommend booking some time with us, and we'll actually talk through what has happened or what is in the process of happening through migrating from your server to your Microsoft environment, and we can unpack that a little bit further. Sounds like there might be multiple questions there that we can answer in a one-to-one style. If that's okay, Deb, we can be in touch following the call.
Yeah, I pop in the chat out the link to our hub. So be in touch, let us know if we can help. Please pop in some questions because these are the last questions that we are taking in for now in this webinar. Another question, Sophie, can multiple people work on the same file simultaneously when you've shared a link? If so, what happens if people happen to work on, for example, the same cell in Excel? Which one gets saved?
So Microsoft won't let you work on the same cell at the same time. They will lock that cell. Excel is a really great example in that way. So there is some parameters around how you're collaborating at once. And we do recommend that when you are collaborating, especially when you're in the same document at the same time, actually talking to each other at the same time on Teams, send them a message being like, hey, I'm working on that paragraph, actually work together in that way, utilize the other collaboration tools as part of Teams and Microsoft 365 so that you aren't just deleting each other's sentences, etc., that you are actually collaborating and working, co-working together.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Sophie. And probably this is the last question that we're taking in. It's a question about how secure it is for confidential documents in the board portal that I mentioned earlier in the previous question. I'll take this one. It is as secure as you configure it. So with this, you can implement, you configure permission correctly, require your board members do not use it on a public computer, implement MFA, multi-factor authentication, and of course, you apply relevant permission level to each of the members, like whether they can read that only, are they allowed to download the documents, all sort of things. So it's very important that you configure the portal correctly to make it secure. I hope that all the questions. If you have any other question, please feel free to pop in the survey right after our webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and thank you, Sophie, for giving us the webinar today. I hope to see you soon in the next webinar. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.